They come roaring across the desert in battered pickup trucks, faces wrapped in dust, rifles raised high. No banners, no insignias, just men driven by a cause they barely understand. They believe they're on a mission. They don't know they're being led into a trap so perfect that not a single one of them is meant to survive. But here's the most insane part. One of them will, and not only will he survive, he'll go on to run an entire country. This is the story of Syria's jihad squadrons. It all started in 2011. Syria erupted when ordinary people took to the streets demanding political change. For a moment, it looked like another Arab Spring uprising with protests, chants, and hopeful crowds. In most places, unrest like this fizzles out. But Bashar al-Assad's government had other ideas. Security forces opened fire, tanks rolled in, protesters vanished into prisons, and what started as an uprising turned into a civil war. In just 2 years, the conflict dragged in almost every major power in the region. Syria was effectively carved up among the different forces: the regime, Kurdish militias, IS, moderate rebels, and a growing Islamist network tied to al-Qaeda. What began as demonstrations for change had already killed over 100,000 people and driven more than 2 million from their homes. Towns emptied, cities were deserted, and above it all rose the flag of jihad. It created a vacuum these factions would soon fill. As the fighting spread, new rebel groups began to form, hundreds of them, each with its own goals, ideology, and foreign backers. Some wanted democracy, some wanted revenge. But the others, they saw an opportunity to build something much larger, an Islamic state. Many of those who came to Syria were veteran jihadists from Iraq who had cut their teeth in the insurgency against US forces after 2003. They brought battlefield discipline, bomb-making expertise, and a brutal playbook perfected in the streets of Fallujah and Mosul. Tactics born from one war unleashed in another. Among them was a man named Ahmed al-Shara, better known at the time as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, a Syrian veteran who had fought with al-Qaeda in Iraq. Al-Julani brought those lessons of that insurgency home with him. In 2012, he founded Jabhat al-Nusra, the Nusra Front. Officially, it was just another rebel group, but secretly it was al-Qaeda reborn on Syrian soil. An insurgency doesn't run on faith alone, though. And from the start, Nusra's funding pipeline ran through a shadow economy of donors and middlemen. Wealthy donors, often from Gulf states, quietly funneled millions into Syria through charities and organizations that blended legitimate aid with covert military support. The US Treasury later traced several of these networks directly to al-Qaeda's financial apparatus. That mix of public donations and secret wire transfers became the foundation of Syria's jihad economy. Early on, Nusra earned respect by keeping order in rebel zones. It distributed aid, ran Sharia courts, and punished looters. For many Syrians, they looked like the only group capable of restoring some degree of stability, the kind of structure that the failing state couldn't. But really, Nusra wasn't fighting democracy or reform. Its leaders were building something else. A permanent Islamist foothold, a state ruled by Sharia law. Unlike other rebel groups that lived off of looting or foreign handouts, Nusra ran itself like a miniature government. It collected taxes, issued IDs, and even set up an internal affairs office to punish corruption. For many civilians, that kind of order, even though it came under Sharia law, was better than the bloodshed and chaos. And soon, Syria became the magnet for global jihad. Tens of thousands of foreign fighters poured in from more than 100 countries. They were often guided by smuggling networks and religious recruiters. Some joined ISIS, which declared its caliphate. Others joined Nusra, drawn to its more Syrian-focused brand of jihad. Once inside the country, new arrivals were taken to maktabs, or induction centers, where they were vetted, trained, and assigned to squadrons based on language or skill. Western converts often worked in propaganda using English to reach new audiences online. Some went to sniper and assault units, while others joined explosives teams. Analysts began referring to these various fighting groups as jihad squadrons, small semi-autonomous units of 50 to 300 men. They operated like special forces teams, mobile, highly disciplined, and ideologically committed. Each squadron handled its own logistics, funding, and recruitment, but answered loosely to a parent organization like Nusra, Arar al-Sham, or Jaj al-Islam, and they filmed everything. Drone footage of battles, slickly edited martyrdom videos, and glossy propaganda. They all gave the impression of a well-oiled international army, and it worked. Each upload became a recruitment ad. Every fight, every sacrifice drew in the next wave of foreign fighters. Western intelligence later estimated that over 40,000 foreign fighters from dozens of countries had entered Syria. While a large share joined ISIS, many aligned with al-Nusra and its allies, becoming a part of the jihad squadrons. By 2015, Syria's northwest, especially Idlib province, had become their stronghold. From here, the jihad squadrons launched coordinated offensives against both Assad's forces and rival rebel groups. Their biggest victory came that March, when several of these factions united under a single banner called Jaish al-Fatah, or the Army of Conquest. The alliance unleashed a three-pronged attack on the city of Idlib. It was a brutal mix of old insurgent tricks and modern warfare. For the first time, jihad commanders from different nations coordinated artillery, armor, and suicide bombings. Vehicle-borne IEDs and foreign attackers opened routes as units armed with captured anti-tank tow missiles blasted through armored positions. Meanwhile, coordinated artillery and mortar barges covered the approach of pickup convoys. Within days, they captured the city of Idlib, a provincial capital Assad had held since the beginning of the war. It was one of the regime's worst defeats. Propaganda channels flooded the internet with drone footage, pickup trucks racing across open fields, mortars firing in perfect rhythm, and fighters from as far away as Uzbekistan storming government buildings. That victory transformed Idlib into the capital of jihad. Thousands of new volunteers poured in through Turkey. Every victory video doubled as a recruiting poster, and the jihad squadrons, once a loose collection of militias, began to look like an organized army. But it didn't last. A year later, they tried to replicate that success in Aleppo, the largest city in Syria, and the results were disastrous. From 2012 to 2016, dozens of jihad factions staged what became known as the Battle of Aleppo, a desperate effort to break the government's siege. But where Idlib had shown unity, Aleppo exposed division. Each commander answered to his own emir. Some fought for ideology, others for territory. Coordination broke down almost immediately. Despite waves of car bombings and foreign reinforcements, Assad's forces, backed by Russian air power, tightened the noose block by block. Inside the city, civilians and fighters were trapped together. In December, Aleppo finally fell. Tens of thousands of rebels and jihadists were forced to retreat west to Idlib, their last major stronghold. The United Nations estimated massive casualties, including thousands of civilians, and the defeat erased years of jihadist territorial gains. After Aleppo, many of the jihadists realized they could never win through endless fragmentation. What they needed was a single unified command, and that is exactly what Golani would build next. But success brought problems. Nusra's ties to al-Qaeda made it a target for US airstrikes and alienated other rebels. Soon, Golani realized that if he wanted to survive, his group would need a new identity. In 2016, he publicly severed ties with al-Qaeda, rebranding Nusra as Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, the front for the conquest of the Levant. It was a calculated move. A year later, he went further, merging multiple Islamist factions into Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. The Jihad squadrons were restructured into HTS's formal military hierarchy, brigades, battalions, and administrative offices. Golani claimed HTS was no longer a part of the global jihad, but a purely Syrian force. For groups like Nusra, the rebranding wasn't new. Across North Africa, al-Qaeda franchises had done the same. The goal was always optics: shed the terrorist label, win local support, and outlast Western intervention. Golani wasn't inventing the playbook. He was perfecting it for Syria. The first goal was to legitimize HTS as a local power rather than a branch of global jihad. The second, to unify the fractured squadrons under one command structure. The move worked. Western airstrikes focused on ISIS instead. While HTS tightened control over Idlib, once HTS dominated the northwest, it moved from fighting to governing. Running a mini-state required money, a lot of it. Its biggest income came from taxing fuel and goods at the Bab al-Hawa border crossing with Turkey, a trade route that moved hundreds of millions of dollars in commerce annually. HTS also imposed levies on electricity, real estate, and even NOSAs operating in its territory. Every liter of diesel, every sack of flour passed through its hands. The old Jihad squadron still enforced order and collected taxes, but now they wore new insignia and operated under ministries. The structure that once waged holy war was evolving into a state bureaucracy. Julani positioned HTS as a pragmatic Islamist movement. He granted interviews, strolled through markets in civilian clothes, and spoke about security and reconstruction. For battle-weary Syrians, that mattered. Life under HTS was predictable, something rare after years of chaos. But internally, dissent was growing. Hardline jihadists accused Golani of betraying al-Qaeda and the cause when they splintered off into a rival group called Haras Ali. HTS responded swiftly and crushed them militarily. HTS's hybrid model, part army, part government, had no serious competitors in the northwest. The Jihad squadrons had become the pillars of governance. In late 2024, after years of attrition, HTS led a coordinated offensive that captured Damascus. Assad fled. For the first time in over a decade, the jihadist network that began as scattered squadrons now ruled most of Syria. Early in 2025, July rebranded once more. This time, he stepped in front of the cameras using his real name, Ahmed al-Shara, to announce the new creation of a new Syrian army. On paper, It was meant to mirror a professional state military. But Western intelligence noticed something else. Many of the officers came directly from HTS ranks, men trained in irregular warfare, not state defense. Officially, it was a professional military designed to unify all rebel forces. In practice, it was the same network of jihad squadrons absorbed and rebadged as state divisions. Reports identified at least 22 senior officers with jihadist backgrounds, including the Minister of Defense, Chief of Staff, and multiple division commanders. Many had once led units in HTS, al-Sham and Ansar al-Tawhid, and their divisions were filled with former HTS and ISIS fighters. The jihad squadrons didn't disappear. They were nationalized. The new Syrian army now presents itself as a conventional military. It holds graduation ceremonies, parades, and press conferences. But its DNA is unmistakable. The combination of the same jihad formations that once operated independently across Syria. The Minister of Defense, Marhaf Abu Kasra, previously commanded HTS's military wing. The Chief of Staff, Ali Nur al-Din al-Nassan, was an HTS field commander. Other generals once ran organizations that pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. At the field level, the divisions operate like the old squadrons, decentralized, loyal to their commanders, and ideologically motivated. They maintain old tribal and religious networks, even as they wear national uniforms. Julani's government calls this integration stabilization. Analysts call it militarized jihadism, just dressed up in a new outfit. On the surface, Syria in 25 is calmer than it has been in years. Roads are open, aid convoys move freely, and foreign journalists are back in Damascus. But beneath that calm is a fragile balance. A new state built by the same militant architecture that once tore Syria apart. And across the borders, neighboring countries have no choice but to watch uneasily. Inside Syria, minority groups fear revenge attacks, and hardline fighters still dream of a broader jihad beyond Syria's borders. So, while the groups' names may have changed, the ideology remains the same. And what's happening in Syria isn't unique. From Afghanistan's Taliban to Libya's militias, modern jihadist movements have learned to trade black flags for bureaucracies. Syria simply became the first place where that experiment succeeded on a national scale. What began as small cells of foreign fighters evolved into the military backbone of a new state. Their leaders now run the ministries, their soldiers now patrol checkpoints, and their story blurs the line between rebellion and government. So, it turns out that Syria's jihad squadrons never vanished at all. They simply changed their uniforms. Now go check out Saddam Hussein's violent emergence as Iraq's leader, or this